Hello everyone. Let us continue our discussion on interaction modeling. In our previous class, we have seen that interaction modeling is the third leg of the three models, right? That is a class model, state model, and third happens to be the interaction modeling. In the previous class, we have seen the basics of interaction modeling. We have seen that it is divided at three levels. One is use cases, sequence diagrams, and activity diagrams. Right? We dealt with use cases in detail, wherein we saw that use case models. Use case is basically a functionality, that is what is the services provided by that particular system, and then it contains of actors and use cases. Actors can be persons, devices, and another systems, anything that interacts directly with the system. Actor is represented with a stick man, right? So actors could be anything. Basically it is making the role of that particular thing clear as to who all are interacting with the system and what piece of functionality they are interacting with. We have seen example of a use case where we saw buy a beverage, load items, make repairs. Right? It should be at a high level, abstract level, and not individual button clicks. Error conditions are also a part of the use case. So this was the example we had seen for a vending machine. In the rectangle, you have the name of the use case model listed. Ellipse is telling us about the use case, that is the different functionalities the vending machine is going to be used for. Who all are going to use it? These are the actors which are represented by the stickman in UML. So we have the customer, repair technician, and stock clerk, right? So you see, everywhere the connections are there. Customer can only buy a beverage, he cannot do any of the other things. That is what is being told through this diagram. Repair technician can only make use of these two use cases, and stock clerk can only load the items, right? So looking into this, we have a few guidelines to be followed when you are drawing a use case model. First, you need to determine the system boundary, right? So I had already explained system boundary. Up to what extent you are developing the system should be clear. Ensure that actors are focused, that is what role they are playing, okay, should be clear. Whether he's a customer, repair technician, stock clerk, if you take a computer system, whether he's a owner, whether he's an administrator, whatever it is, right? Each use case must provide value to the users, right? It was talking about this abstract level, as I told you. It shouldn't be individual button clicks, but when you say buy beverage, everything that is included in buying a beverage, right? Relate use cases and actors. This relation that we are talking about, when you're connecting it through these lines, right? You cannot leave any actor unconnected, nor can you leave any use case unconnected. So at least one use case should be connected to at least one actor, and one actor should be connected to at least one use case. You just can't draw the use cases and say nobody is using it, or you just can't have actors and saying it is not connected to any of piece of functionality. That is what we mean by relate use cases and actors. Remember that use cases are informal. There is nothing like having a syntax, but these are the UML notations that you need to follow, right, when it comes to use cases, and they can be structured. This last point that can be structured, that is in terms of relationship, where you have includes, extends, generalization. So details of how use cases can be structured you would be seeing in advanced interaction modeling, right? So all these things we have covered in the previous class. Let us go ahead today with sequence models, right? Sequence model elaborates the themes of use cases, and then there are two kinds of sequence models: scenarios and a more structured format called sequence diagrams, right? So now elaborates the theme of use cases. Use cases telling us only about the functionality, but that functionality in what sequence you need to take place, right? That gets clear in your sequence models. So we have two things under that: scenario, which is telling you the entire textual description, like what's the scenario there, how do you describe. So in a paragraph or so you describe that this is the scenario, this is happening, right? And then diagrams are telling you in the form of using notations diagrammatically, avoiding those huge set of statements that you will have to go through, right? So let us have an example to understand it better. It's a sequence of events that occurs during one particular execution of a system, such as for a use case. Like, see this. Okay. This is a scenario for a session with an online stockbroker, right? So what are the sequence of events that are happening during this one particular execution of the system? A person logs in, establishes secure communications, displays portfolio information, enters the order to buy shares, verifies. Okay, so you see one entire segment with all these statements being written. This is one scenario that is happening, which you have written to tell us what is the sequence of events happening, right, with respect to this use case. right? Now imagine if we had written so many scenarios for every use case, the amount of time that it would consume for a person who is developing or implementing the design, okay, to read the code, the scenario itself would be time consuming, right? So one modification to this was the sequence diagram, or the next thing that they came up was the sequence diagram, where all of this what you are talking about, okay, no doubt the sequence of events are clear, but who is interacting with whom, that is which object is interacting with which other object, okay, it again becomes pretty difficult to figure out when it comes to this scenario, and then you have to again make a separate homework in order to indicate all that. So what you can do is develop a sequence diagram, right? So sequence diagram shows the participants in an interaction and the sequence of messages among them. It shows the sequence of interaction of a system with its actors to perform all or part of the use case. So when you look at this diagram, right, these three things that we are having, these are the objects of reference which are interacting right now in this scenario, right? And this is telling about that customer is interacting with the stock brokerage system. What he's trying to do, he is logging in, right? So these arrows are telling us what is happening, who is interacting with whom, and this is the sequence. This is the first thing that has to happen, this is the second thing, third thing, fourth thing, and so on, right? So you can see the sequence diagram tells us the sequence of events and not the exact time at what it should happen, right? But what is the correct order in which the operations should happen for that particular use case to execute successfully, right? So you see, login, secure connection, all this happens. Then you verify funds, right? Request confirmation, confirm purchase, display order number. So here you see this is in turn should interact with securities exchange to place the order. Here you log out, so again insecure communication, goodbye, and then this reports results of trade, right? So this scenario becomes pretty much clear than reading paragraphs of pages wherein you're trying to figure out who is interacting with whom. Sequence diagram becomes an advantage. So this is what you can show with respect to sequence diagrams, right? So in case of sequence model, two things, one is scenarios, one is sequence diagrams. It is basically telling you the order of events, how they are going to take place, right? Guidelines and basically the interaction between objects. Guidelines for sequence models, right? So there are two kinds of sequence models. Scenarios document a sequence of events with pros. Sequence diagrams also document the sequence of events but more clearly show the actors involved, right? So this is the difference between the two. So that is showing you in a textual form. This is being more clear by showing you the even the actors and objects. So what are the guidelines for sequence model preparation? You need to prepare at least one scenario per use case. I hope by now scenario and sequence diagram is clear. First you need to prepare the scenario per use case, right? That is, the steps in the scenario should be logical commands, not individual button clicks. Later during implementation, you can specify the exact syntax of input. Start with the simplest mainline interaction, no repetitions, one main activity and typical values for all parameters. If there are substantially different mainline interactions, write a scenario for each. Right? So you need to prepare one scenario, the set of statements for every use case. Abstract the scenarios into sequence diagrams. So once you have prepared the scenarios, draw a sequence diagram from that so that it can clearly show the contribution of each actor. It is important to separate the contribution of each actor as a prelude to organizing behavior about objects. Divide complex interactions. So break large interactions into their constituent tasks and prepare a sequence diagram for each of them. Prepare a sequence diagram for each error condition, right? Show the system response to the error condition. So this also becomes important in order to handle so that your system doesn't break down. You need to be able to handle the error condition, right? So before going ahead with activity model, this is recap the 4 guidelines once again. You need to prepare at least one scenario per use case, abstract the scenarios into sequence diagrams, divide complex interactions and prepare a sequence diagram for each error condition, right? So these are the 4 guidelines you need to keep in mind when it comes to sequence models. So having seen the importance of the sequence models and use cases, let us go ahead with the third abstraction level, that is the activity diagram, that is the activity models, right? An activity diagram shows the sequence of steps that make up a complex process such as an algorithm or workflow, right? So what are we trying to show here? The sequence of steps such as an algorithm or workflow. It basically shows the flow of control similar to a sequence diagram, but this focuses on operations rather on objects, right? So here the focus is on operations. So every level of abstraction has its own important use cases talking about functionality. Sequence diagram are talking about sequence and which interactor actor or object is being interaction is in interaction. An activity model is focusing on the flow of control of operations, right? So let us go ahead with discussion on this model. Example here, how an activity diagram is represented in an UML. So you can see you have a rounded box, right? You have this solid circle to indicate the start. You have a bullseye to indicate that this is where it ends, right? So you see one, this is telling you the transition, that is the flow. After verify order, it should go to execute order. From here, this is a decision making, that is if it happens to be a failure, it should send a failure notice. If it's a success, this is what should happen, right? Now this thing that you can see here, this is known as split of control, right? When two or three things are happening simultaneously, you need to split that control into those three things that are happening simultaneously, right? So if the execute order becomes a success, it should send the confirmation, it should debit the account, it should update the online portfolio, right? So all the three things should happen. Order is not important here, but all these three things are to take place after execute order, right? So after debit account, that trade should be settled, right? Only after all these three functionalities are complete, right? Then it can go to close order. If one of them is incomplete, it cannot go to close order. So this is known as merging of control. This is where the three things merge. So unless all three are done, you can't go ahead with the next one, which is close order, right? So this is known as split of control. This is known as merging of control, and finally you come to close order. So even if it's a failure, after this it is coming to closing of order. So this is basically where an activity diagram comes into picture, where you're focusing on operations. Activities. Some activities run forever until an outside event interrupts them, but most activities eventually complete their work and terminate by themselves. The completion of an activity is a completion event and usually indicates that the next activity can be started. An unlabeled arrow from one activity to another is an activity diagram indicates that the first activity must complete before the second activity can begin, right? So you can see unlabeled arrow. So we have arrows from one activity to another, right? So unless one completes, the second cannot begin. So you can see here, so different conditions, how else you can draw an, so this is an activity diagram for execute order. So you can see finer orders, so everywhere decision making is happening based on that what should happen. So this is the start, and you could see it could end in any of these ways, right? Where a seller at limit price or better, he buyer at limit price or better, right? So you can see where all it could end, the different points. Branches, right? Just now I had told you split of control and merge of control, right? And branches. So branches is decision making, right? That diamond symbol that you have, especially this one, right? So here it is branching. This is what is a branch in an activity diagram. If there is more than one successor to an activity, each arrow may be labeled with a condition in square brackets, for example, failure. All subsequent conditions are tested when an activity completes. If one condition is satisfied, its arrow indicates the next activity to perform. If no condition is satisfied, the diagram is badly formed, and the system will hang unless it is interpreted at some higher level. So if you see that if no condition is being satisfied, it cannot go ahead, right? So either it should be a failure or it should be a success. Either it should be selling or it should be buying. There cannot be anything else happening in between where the system would hang. Initiation and termination, I showed you solid circle, right? So these are your, this is your initiation, this is the termination with a bullseye, right? So this is talking about it. A solid circle with an outgoing arrow shows the starting point of an activity diagram. When it is activated, control starts at the solid circle and proceeds via the outgoing arrow towards the first activities. Bullseye, as I told you, it's where the operations terminate for that particular activity diagram, right? And it has only incoming arrows. When control reaches a bullseye, the overall activity is complete and execution of the activity diagram ends, right? So always remember, when it comes to initiation, it always has outgoing arrow. When it comes to termination, it has only incoming arrow. Concurrent activities, I told you, this is where you use the split control and the merge control, or you even call it as fork control. In the diagram, this is what I had shown you. This is where you fork a control, right? And here you merge the control. So in an activity diagram, what we are seeing in these slides are all the explanation of these. What do you mean by initiation, termination? What do you mean by branching? What do you mean by this fork a control, right? So all these are being explained as a part of activity diagram, right? So we are here on concurrent activities. A fork or merge is shown by a synchronization bar, a heavy line with one or more input arrows and one or more output arrows. On a synchronization, control must be present on all of the incoming activities and control passes to all of the outgoing activities. Now executable activity diagrams. This is one additional point with respect to what we have already seen. Activity diagrams are not only useful for defining the steps in a complex process, but they can also be used to show the progression of control during execution. That is, now in the activity diagram it is showing you the flow of operations, but you do not know right now the progress is on which particular operation. So to indicate that, you can even have executable activity diagrams where you're trying to show a token that this is a particular operation that is in progress. So what you do there? An activity token can be placed on an activity symbol to indicate that it is executing. When an activity completes, the token is removed and placed on the outgoing arrow. In the simplest case, the token then moves to the next activity, right? So you have something like a token which is moving from one operation to the next to indicate what is the current operation in progress. So that is how you can make use of executable activity diagrams. If there are multiple outgoing arrows with conditions, the conditions are examined to determine the successor activity. Only one successor activity can receive the token even if more than one condition is true. If no condition is satisfied, the activity diagram is ill-formed, right? So your care has to be taken that some condition is being satisfied and the progression of operations is happening because the activity token is then placed there. Multiple tokens can arise through concurrency if an executing activity is followed by a concurrent split of control. So in case of split of control, you will have multiple tokens. Completion causes an increase in the number of tokens. A token is placed on each of the concurrent activities. Similarly, a merge of control causes a decrease in the number of tokens as tokens migrate from input activities to the output activities. All the input activities must complete before the merge can actually occur. I have already explained this in the diagram. They always need to merge right before you go ahead with the next one. So that's the details about on activity models. Let us see a few guidelines. Right. So what do we have? Don't misuse activity diagrams. Level diagrams, that is, they should be at some consistent level of detail. Place additional detail for any activity in a separate diagram. Right, that level what we were talking of, like in case of use case, how you said buy a beverage, make repair. So in activity diagram also you can't take individual button clicks, but one complete operation that is happening, you represent that. Be careful with branches and conditions. Here I told you at least one condition must be satisfied, right? Otherwise it should use an else condition, right? Some condition should be satisfied, it shouldn't hang in between. Be careful with concurrent activities, right? So how I told you simultaneously if they are happening, each of those should complete before moving ahead with the next. Consider executable activity diagrams. They can help developers understand their systems better. Sometimes they can even be helpful for end users who want to follow the progression of a process, right? So this is how you go ahead with the guidelines of activity models. Just a recap on that. Don't misuse activity diagrams, level diagrams. Be careful with branches and conditions with concurrent activities and consider executable activity diagrams, right? So in this chapter 7 of interaction modeling, we basically dealt with the three abstract levels under the interaction modeling, that is use case, activity and sequence models, right? And we discussed the guidelines for each, what each significance of each diagram, right? So in the next chapter, we would be going ahead with advanced interaction modeling, where we would be seeing some advanced concept with respect to this chapter, right? That's all for this video. Thank you. Have a nice day.